So here's Oregon for their compulsory toss. Mackenzie Reagan, the top on the right. Alexis Cross, the top on the left here for the Ducks. Clad in black today. That's pretty darn clean right there.
Yeah. It's just not a lot to critique unless you're a very, very trained eye on that one. That is not a lot to critique. Obviously, each and every event you see here in the sport of acro and tumbling, phenomenal feats of strength, of athleticism. Yes, there are small things the judges are looking for, but in terms of just watching that here with the naked eye and us not being judges, there's not a lot to critique there, and it's going to come down here early on to just a couple decimal points between these two teams here in the first couple heats. And we don't have the scores in yet, but I have a strong feeling that these are going to be really close early on.
Again, you're looking for about over a 38 or so, I'd say is about average for compulsory, with how good these two teams are. Again, I mentioned it before, Hawaii Pacific scored a 37.2 in their compulsory event against Azusa Pacific on Monday. And now here's the last heat, the compulsory tumbling event. 18 members for either side. Good looking for no extra steps. Didn't see any there for Hawaii Pacific. And good synchronization as well.
A little bit of teetering there on the landing for a few, but you're right, the sync.
A little off sync there. Like Elena Fields there on the far side in the back. A little off sync for the Sharks, but that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, and this is a Hawaii Pacific team led by Keenan Wan, who actually went to Oregon. She's part of the stunt and gymnastics team in Oregon back in 2010, and she's led the Hawaii Pacific program to new heights. And we see a replay there, and there was a little bit more teetering there than we initially thought, especially on those landings, and the sync wasn't quite perfect. But overall, they're happy, and that's the thing about this sport is, and every sport really, but you can't get too down on yourself early on. One run that's not great, you can easily make up. So the Sharks, I still think, are feeling good about themselves, looking for what could be an upset victory here on the road.
Another thing we should mention is we see more tumbling events. You step off the mat, that is also a large deduction.
Yes.
As well. But you mentioned Hawaii Pacific here only in their 4th year as a program, and Keenan Wan has been the head coach all 4 years. Tough first year, just went 1-6, but bounced back. Got all the way to the semifinals after a 6-2 season in the NCAA overall. And then last year went 4-4. Begin with a win this year, and now we're looking at Oregon here on the compulsory tumbling. Very experienced Oregon team. They were young last year. Didn't actually graduate a lot. So big things expected for Oregon this season.
That's the thing. Chelsea Shaw, even the head coach, she's not 100% sure what to expect from her team because they haven't been out on the floor yet. But you're right. A lot of talent returning and high expectations. And it all starts here in this meet. A little off sync there. Similar to Hawaii Pacific. Not quite perfect. And a little bit better. It's incredible how much of a mental battle this sport is, right? You've executed these moves hundreds, if not thousands of times, have these athletes in their lives, and it's kind of you against yourself out there.
Remember, these are athletes that were recruited from high school, not being acro and tumbling athletes. Cheerleading background, gymnastics background, competitive cheer as well. I mean, all facts of life, and this is one of those situations where when you bring them in to be acro and tumbling athletes, we talked to Chelsea Shaw, as you mentioned, a lot of it is teaching them this sport when they first get here to college. And it's pretty impressive what they can do just athletically, of course, and that's really where it comes from, is that athletic background. That's why they're recruited.
Right, when you're recruiting on the basketball court or on the football field, as we see a nice replay there. Not perfect sync, but comparably don't see a huge difference between the heats for Hawaii Pacific and for Oregon. But to what we were talking about with recruiting, when you're a basketball coach, I mean, you go to a basketball team, right? You go to the high school level and you recruit right off the basketball court or off the football field. And Acro and Tumbling, it's not a huge high school sport right now. It's expanding in club levels, but not a sponsored high school activity quite yet. So you got to go a lot of different routes and kind of search and explore for athletes, which can make it a little bit more difficult, but makes it a lot more exciting for these athletes, because the more opportunities for scholarships, the better. And this is an equivalency sport in which you can, similar to baseball, divide up the scholarships. So there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of different women for scholarships. You just see coaches recruit across different sports, and you're right, a lot of the young athletes are just learning the nuances of Acro and Tumbling.
Still don't have the scores yet from the compulsory round. Again, we just finished up the compulsory event here. It's the first of 6 events in the Acro and Tumbling meet. Next is the Acro event. We'll have 3 heats, the 5-element, 6-element, and 7-element. Get to the scores for the compulsory as soon as we get them, but the basics for the Acro event are, with a 5-element, you have 5 Acro elements. And what an element is it's essentially a movement. So you have 5 movements, 6 movements, 7 movements of acrobatics and tumbling. And again, it will be Hawaii Pacific, Oregon, Hawaii Pacific, Oregon, Hawaii Pacific, Oregon for those 3 heats. And that's serious strength, Acro.
You got to hold each element for 3 seconds. So you'll see here, once one gets going, how difficult it truly is.
So we get the scores now for Acro. Hawaii Pacific got 9.55, Oregon with a 9.60. So Oregon currently in the lead. For compulsory pyramid, 9.85 for the Sharks. And for the Ducks, also a 9.85. For the toss now, the Sharks get a 9.90. And for the Ducks, coming up here any moment, suspense is real, 10.0. It was worth it for the Ducks. And finally the tumbling, 8.7 for the Sharks. And for the Ducks, a 9.15. So the Ducks win the compulsory over the Sharks. 38 total for the Sharks, 38.60 for the Ducks.
That is, sorry Zach, right on average for Oregon compared to what they averaged in the compulsories last season at about 38.3. So you start off the season, maybe these athletes for both sides have a little bit of nerves. But here's the next event.
Next up is the Acro event. There are 3 heats.
The 5, the 6, the 7-element.
No step from her feet.
We want still tops.
Straight body lines.
Let's go, Ducks.
It's Acro time.
Very nice.
That's awesome.
Much better than we could have described it.
Well, there you go. That's the Acro event. Perfectly described.